Bom dia everyone, the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend is underway. Let's have a look at sprint qualifying because of course Sao Paulo this weekend is a sprint weekend, so we've got meaningful running as early as Friday evening. So let's dive into the 5 things that we learned from the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix sprint qualifying. Let's first start with Aston Martin, who were simply awful during today's running. Both Aston Martins out in SQ1. They have qualified well down the grid. Fernando Alonso in 16th and his teammate Lance Stroll in 19th. Guanyu Zhou was the only driver behind Stroll, and in truth, Zhou couldn't really do a proper run in the end of SQ1. A really terrible session for Aston Martin. Let's not get away from this. Alonso, of course, struggling this weekend with his own personal illness. You know, he went back to Europe between the Mexican and the Brazilian Grand Prix, so a lot of time really there spent travelling back and forth between continents, less time to prepare as well. He wasn't present during the Thursday track walk and stuff like that, and there have been meaningful changes to the circuit as well. So really Alonso not firing on all cylinders, but even when Stroll is, unfortunately for him, it is not enough, and both cars are out in SQ1 and start well down. They've got no real chance of points from there as they have to crack into the top 8 to be able to do so. Someone who does have chances of scoring points though is Oliver Behrman. Now Behrman has a bit of a super sub again this weekend because unlike Fernando Alonso, Kevin Magnussen has been unable to start really running this weekend in Brazil due to illness. I hope he's better soon. He might still compete in the Grand Prix, but for the sprint anyway, that is tomorrow, Ollie Behrman will take up the second Haas seat, and in truth it's the first Haas seat really when you think about it, because he's up all the way into P10, he got all the way into SQ3. Had he been able to set a time that actually, you know, stood, he might have well been further up the order, but as it is, he starts in P10 ahead of his more experienced teammate Nico Hülkenberg, who is in P12, so very impressive from Ollie Behrman, stepping in at the last minute yet again and reaping the rewards of doing so. Max Verstappen was in P4 today. This is the third thing that we learned. Now, we already knew that he had a 5-place grid penalty, but that will only apply to the Grand Prix. He's changed a power unit component. I believe it's the actual engine, the ICE. I did bring you this earlier on in the week on the F1Chronicle.com. It's not a bad run for Verstappen at all, especially when you consider where his teammate Perez ended up, down in P13. Unlucky for him with that one. But yeah, Red Bull not looking the quickest this weekend. That very much went to McLaren, but currently Verstappen is sandwiching the Ferraris, and he's going to do very well to be able to challenge the McLarens, who got a 1-2 in this sprint qualifying as well in tomorrow's sprint race. But yeah, let's talk about McLaren next. A perfect sprint qualifying for them. P1 for Oscar Piastri, P2 for Lando Norris. Their pace was absolutely sensational during sprint qualifying today. Lando Norris was a whole 0.8 of a second ahead of the entire field in SQ1, and it was very tight between the pair of them in SQ3 for the sprint pole, and Piastri ended up pipping Lando Norris by, I think it was like 0.02 of a second. It was a really small margin, and because of that he ends up starting on a sprint pole for the second time in his career. He's never had a pole position outright, but if you're heroics tomorrow from today, he will do so, of course. But yeah, a good session for McLaren. They very much needed that, and as well with Verstappen's penalty coming up as well for the Grand Prix, this is a real chance for them to get some massive ground on Max Verstappen. I fully expect Piastri to move out of the way of Lando Norris if they are 1 and 2 in this race, but we'll see how things go with that, because they'll have a challenge not only from Max Verstappen but also from Ferrari behind. Charles Leclerc ended up in P3 and Carlos Sainz in P5. Leclerc though, it's not all hunky-dory for him, I'm afraid, because he's going to have to be summoned and appear in front of the stewards very shortly as I record this for his swearing incident in the Mexican Grand Prix cooldown. Unfortunately, yeah, he dropped an F1 base, and they've already gone through this story in a different article video, sorry. But yeah, pretty poor from Leclerc to have to go in front of the stewards like that. I'm not blaming him by any, I'm not saying he's the poor one. The fact that we're having this situation, he's having to do that, is embarrassing on Formula One's part. But on the track, Ferrari are looking good. They've won the last 2 races, a 1-2 and a 1-3 in the US and Mexican Grand Prix. They're going to need to get a good start. They're going to need to get a very good start tomorrow to be able to repeat those kinds of heroics, but you never know. They didn't look that great in the sprint in the US earlier in the month, but, well, actually it's a new month now, it's November now, but a few weeks ago I should say. But you never know, they could well be on for the Grand Prix victory on Sunday. But going off the sprint results, McLaren look like the team in the ascendancy. But who are you backing for the sprint win tomorrow? Let us know in the comments below. And of course, keep it subscribed to the F1Chronicle.com to see much more content on the Brazilian Grand Prix throughout this weekend. See you soon, guys. Have a good one.